What if Goku and Gohan went into the Hyperbolic Time Chamber before Vegeta arrived instead of after? Not a small change, a complete restructuring of the Cell Saga, because the entire arc depends on the specific sequence of events, and changing that sequence does not produce a better version or a worse version. It produces a completely different story, one that loses things the original could not afford to lose. Here is why that matters, and here is exactly what breaks. First, what actually happened in canon. Vegeta arrives, Goku dies, time passes, Vegeta grows stronger through battle experience and Saiyan healing. Then comes the chamber, then comes Cell. The timeline is deliberate. Vegeta's arrival creates the crisis. The crisis justifies the chamber. The chamber creates the power increase. Each element triggers the next. The sequence is load-bearing. Now flip it. Goku and Gohan enter the chamber before Vegeta shows up. They train for a subjective year inside, they come out exponentially stronger, then Vegeta arrives. Here is the immediate problem. He is outmatched from the moment he lands. The most dangerous threat in his world just became irrelevant before he could establish himself as one. A character who was supposed to be unbeatable gets defeated before he can build any credibility as a threat. The entire second act of the saga collapses before it starts, and Vegeta's power progression does not even follow the same path. In canon, his growth comes from specific battles and Saiyan biology, the near-death recovery cycle. But if Goku and Gohan are already beyond him when he arrives, those battles never happen the same way. He never gets the opportunities to grow. He shows up, gets overpowered, and his arc ends before it begins. The late arc ally who sacrifices himself against Cell, that character simply does not exist in this timeline. The power scaling gets complicated fast. If Goku emerges from the chamber already chamber-trained and exponentially stronger, what happens when he faces Cell? In canon, Goku realizes Cell is stronger than him. He makes the decision to sacrifice himself so Gohan has a chance. That sacrifice is the emotional engine of the entire back half of the saga. But if Goku goes in earlier and comes out stronger, maybe he is actually capable of winning the fight himself. That changes everything. The moment Goku dies to give his son a chance, gone, and with it, the foundation of Gohan's entire arc. The Cell Saga's emotional core is not Cell. It is Gohan becoming stronger than his father through accumulated suffering. Facing Vegeta, losing Krillin, watching his father die in front of him and carry the weight of that choice. Those experiences do not just provide motivation, they are the specific architecture that makes his final transformation feel earned. Remove the Vegeta arc and Gohan does not face the same trials. His journey is shorter. His rage in that final moment comes from less. The transformation still might happen, but it does not hit the same way. The difference between a character overcoming years of trauma and a character getting a power-up because something sad happened is the difference between a climax and a plot beat. The android threat changes completely too. In canon, the androids create genuine terror because the Z-fighters are desperate. The chamber is a last resort, the only card left to play against opponents they cannot otherwise match. That desperation defines the tone of the arc. It is apocalyptic. The world feels genuinely at risk. But if Goku and Gohan are already chamber-trained before the androids arrive, the threat assessment changes. The androids are not unpredictable anymore. They are expected. The existential dread disappears. The decision to use the chamber stops being a last resort and becomes just training. The emotional weight of the time they sacrifice inside that space, a year of their lives away from everyone, diminishes because the threat they are preparing for is not overwhelming in the same way. Cell's entire strategy shifts as well. In canon, Cell plans carefully around the threats he has to account for. Vegeta factors into his calculations. The absorption timeline is built around specific power readings and specific gaps he can exploit. But if Goku and Gohan are already far beyond him when he first senses them, his behavior changes. He might not attempt absorption while they are present and active. He might stay hidden longer, plan differently. The window where he carries out his scheme closes or reshapes entirely. Every action Cell takes in canon is driven by the specific threat landscape around him. Change that landscape and you do not just change one scene, you change every decision he makes from his first appearance onward. Here is what is genuinely interesting about this alternate timeline. It is not obviously worse. It is just different in ways that trade certain things for others. Some fans would argue it is actually tighter, less time on Vegeta's extended arc, faster movement towards Cell. Stronger heroes force Cell to be even more dangerous to maintain tension. The pacing accelerates. The story compresses into something leaner. Others would argue it loses too much. Vegeta's arc is not filler. It is one of the most compelling character journeys in the saga. The pride-broken warrior who sacrifices himself despite his ego, finding something worth dying for against his entire nature. Remove that, and you remove a redemption arc that gives the whole story emotional layers it does not otherwise have. Vegeta does not become irrelevant in canon. He becomes essential. That transformation only works because of the sequence. He has to establish himself as a threat before he can become an ally. He has to be dangerous before he can be selfless. Change the order, and neither of those things land. The deeper point here is not really about power levels. It is about what the Cell Saga reveals when you try to move its pieces around. Most stories would survive reordering. Most arcs have enough flexibility that shuffling events would produce a different version without fundamentally breaking the structure. The Cell Saga does not work that way. Pull any single piece, and the whole thing requires rebuilding from the ground up. That is not a flaw. That is the opposite of a flaw. It means every element was constructed to depend on what came before it. The Vegeta arc is not just drama filling time between the androids and Cell. It is the specific set of conditions that makes everything after it possible. Gohan's power, Goku's sacrifice, the emotional architecture of the finale. All of it traces back to a sequence that had to happen in exactly that order. Most people treat the Cell Saga as straightforward action storytelling with power escalation, but the underlying structure is genuinely intricate. Each moment creates the conditions for the next one. The androids create the desperation. The desperation justifies the chamber. The chamber creates the gap. The gap sets up the sacrifice. The sacrifice creates the rage. The rage produces the transformation. Remove any link and the chain does not hold. That is why this alternate timeline is worth sitting with. Not because it would be better, and not because it proves canon made mistakes, but because trying to run it reveals how intentional the original construction actually was. The sequence feels inevitable in retrospect, like it had to happen exactly this way, but that inevitability is the result of deliberate craft, not accident. Goku and Gohan going in first would produce a story. It might even be a good story, but it would not be the Cell Saga. It would not have Vegeta's sacrifice. It would not have Goku dying to give his son a chance. It would not have Gohan carrying all of that weight to the moment where he finally lets it go. Those things only exist because of the order. Change the order and you do not improve anything. You just find out how much was depending on it. Drop a comment. Which version would you actually want to watch? And what other what-ifs in Dragon Ball do you think would completely break the story?